The incident at Devil's Den details one of the most disturbing abduction events ever reported. In fact, it may very well have been the most disturbing. If you thought they were just good aliens, then think again. Terry Lovelace has been a lifelong experiencer. Recently, we did a 3-part series on some of Terry's childhood experiences, and we titled that Aliens in the Bedroom, and you can read that at arlhub.com. More recently, he discovered anecdotal proof of an experience when he was snatched from his sleep onto a craft while he slept, and he joins us now. Hello, Terry.
Hi, Dean. Nice to be here.
Great to have you. We briefly spoke back in February during the online summit, but we ran out of time, and you did actually briefly mention the anecdotal proof you had, but we just didn't have time to go in and talk about it. But can you explain what happened?
I sure can. April 16th of 2019, I woke up at 5:55 a.m. and I was out of breath and my pulse was racing. I didn't have chest pain, but I have ischemic heart disease. I've had a heart attack. So I assumed that it must have been some kind of cardiac event, and I asked my wife, "You call an ambulance for me?" And I felt just starved for oxygen. And she did. She called an ambulance. They got there right away, took me to the hospital. My blood pressure was like 220 over 110. My pulse was like 175. It was just crazy, and I just felt bad. By the time I got to the hospital, my pulse rate had dropped and my blood pressure had rebounded back to normal, like 120 over 80. And I actually felt okay. So I should explain. Back in the 80s, I got into the habit of sleeping with a Walkman. Mm-hmm. And I used to listen to cassette tapes on meditation and just sometimes just orchestral music because I don't like, ambient noises in the house at night. They just upset me. Mm-hmm. So I used headphones back then. Now I use my iPhone with earbuds. I sleep with a T-shirt with a pocket where I can keep my iPhone. And I listen to a meditative tape or meditative app. I do it every night. So this night, just like any other, that's how I went to sleep. And when I woke up at 5:55 a.m., my earbuds were on my chest. My iPhone, I keep plugged into the wall on a long cord because the battery's not so good. But from years of doing this, I don't move around a lot or it works fine for me. Mm-hmm. And it was unplugged from the wall. I didn't notice this until afterward. So I got to the hospital. They did, I know the drill. It's an EKG, cardiac enzymes, and a chest X-ray. All of those came back negative. The doctor said, "I don't know what you had. You may have suffered from an arrhythmia of some kind. But your rate is normal now, and I could keep you for observation overnight, or I could cut you loose. It's up to you." And this is 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'd been there 7 hours. I said, 8 hours. I said, "Yeah, just cut me loose. I'd rather go home." So I did. And I just chalked it up to an odd medical event. And that evening, about 7:30, I went for my usual after-dinner walk. And I try to clock pretty religiously 1.5 miles a day every day. And I pulled my health, I went outside, hit the sidewalk, pulled my health app out, and I saw I'd walked like 270 steps or something that day because I'd been in the hospital all day. Mm-hmm. So then I looked down and I saw stairs climbed 6 flights. And I don't have any stairs in my house. I went to the hospital by ambulance. I never climbed a single step. I didn't understand that. And then I looked at the time. The time reads 5:24 a.m. That's 31 minutes before I woke up. I was in bed with my wife at 5:24 a.m., sound asleep. or so I thought. So I looked at that, and my first thought was, well, it has to be an error. And what's interesting is the app has two panels to it. The one panel shows your daily number of steps, and then in this instance, flights of stairs climbed. And then there's a graph on a second screen, and that graph is an XY index with vertical lines that go up to show in 10-foot increments the amount of stairs that you've climbed. And then that bottom axis goes from left to right as time progresses. So normally, if I were, at a parking garage or something, or at some building where I actually climbed 4 or 5 flights of stairs, that happens every now and then, I get, because I can't climb stairs real fast, that passage of time ends up showing like a step pattern.
Right.
As it goes across, where this was one single bar that went straight up. And that bugged me. And I decided I was going to take it to T-Mobile, my carrier, and ask them if they could do a diagnostic on it. And they did, and they said, I don't find anything wrong with your phone, but suggested that I take it directly to Apple. The Apple store took it and kept it for about 4 hours. I came back, and the lady said, I ran a diagnostic. There's nothing wrong with your phone. And I said, well, what does this mean? What does this indicate to you? And she says, to me, it explained, it indicates that between 5:23 and 5:24 a.m., you traveled 60 feet up. Or your phone traveled 60 feet up. And she said it's just very strange.
So, and you can't actually recall any of it taking place?
I can't, but I was troubled by some nightmares afterwards that I thought were disturbing. And after finding out that my phone didn't have a malfunction of any kind, I had just some anxiety about it. I just had that nagging feeling that, something's not right here. And I have a good friend who is a board-certified psychiatrist here in Dallas. I actually met him at a MUFON meeting. He's been in practice for 40 years, and in the last 20 years, he's had a lot of people come to him and say, doctor, you're not going to believe me, but I think I've been abducted. Or, I saw a UFO and I had an odd experience. Well, his medical training was to classify that immediately as delusional, and then look for some underlying organic reason for the delusion. And he was finding out that these people were, absolutely sane without mental illness or defect, and there was no reason for them to make up this story. And he said it just baffled him so much. He wanted to learn more about the topic. So I started going to MUFON meetings, and never spoke. He just liked to listen and hear people's stories. So that's where we met. And he said, I can regress you. He started regressing patients about 5 years ago. And he's got some, of course, privacy laws protect people's identities. But the stories themselves, as long as they're de-identified, are not protected under privacy laws. And he told me some pretty amazing stories that people told him. A couple of which being that they traveled through their ceiling, through walls, or through glass, and went up. And he said, we can hypnotize you and see if it'll help you recall. So we did that, and we did it in December. And I had a lot of trouble getting under or relaxed, but finally I was, and he took me back to waking up, and I was hooked up to a blood pressure monitor, and I had a pretty significant spike in my blood pressure because I had that anxiety all over again. But I could see in my mind's eye, and he asked me, he said, go back earlier than that. He said, that's at 5:55. I want you to go back to 5:23 a.m. And I said, I remember a white light, and I remember traveling up, and my phone was plugged into an outlet, and it was pulling on my shirt, but it would have pulled my phone out of my shirt, but the socket's not real tight, and it pulled it. That's why it was unplugged. And I went up, and I recall going through a dark attic, coming out the other side, and I know this sounds hard to believe, but I saw early morning sunshine scattering, and it was just before the break of dawn. Mm-hmm. And over me, I saw, I'm guessing 60 feet in diameter, a large saucer, and the entire bottom of the thing opened up like a camera lens or like a pupil would expand.
Yeah.
It just opened. And I went up into this thing, and at that point I had a lot of anxiety and my blood pressure spiked, and he said, I'm going to stop you here, this, because we'd been at this about an hour and a half, and he says, we're going to do a second session. Well, the holidays were here, and then one thing led to another, and I didn't get back for that second session before the coronavirus became common, and
yeah.
So I'm waiting for that. It's not the kind of thing you can do via Zoom, unfortunately.
Yeah. Were you able to tell whether there were other people on the craft?
No, I was able to tell that I was going through this black void, and that's as far as I got.
And were you able to identify the aliens?
No. I had the emotion of fear. I had the emotion of floating, which I actually felt the sensation again of floating. And I did not, I would love to go, I need to go back and be regressed again and take it from that point forward.
Yeah.
And as soon as I do that, I'll let you know. I have the hypnosis session on a digital card that the doctor made for me. So I could get that to you somehow if you'd like to.
Sure.
Like to look at it.
Sure. Terry, does it make you kind of angry that they can just come and take you at a whim's notice?
My anger is abated just a little bit. In 1977, I was very angry. I was a very angry young man. And I'm angry because not only did it happen, and like you said, they can do it at their whim, but the after effects. I have a lot of difficulty sleeping. I have to sleep in a certain way with the drapes drawn tight, the door open, and I won't cut across an open field, ever. I'll walk around a mile and a half, but I feel vulnerable being out. So, it's changed my life in ways. But I also kind of temper that with the fact that had these people wanted to, or whatever they are, wanted to kill me or take me away for some nefarious purpose, they easily could have done so. And they didn't. They put me back. So I guess I'm not as angry as I could be. I'm certainly not as angry as I used to be, but maybe more fearful.
Yeah. Would it help if you actually knew why they were taking you? I mean, as a lifelong experiencer, I mean, having taken you for so many years, is there some good that you've been a part of?
I don't know. That's a great question, because it's been a fantasy of mine to sit down and talk to them. And I mean, sit down with them and have a beer, have a coffee, something, and have a genuine conversation and ask them, why me? And, why other people? Why Toby? And what do you need from us? What do you take away from this? Obviously, you get something of value, and I'd like to know what that is.
Yeah. Yeah,
You know,
you'd like to know that there's been a purpose to it all.
I would, and when I think about it, and I have the feeling that they'd look at me and say, "No hard feelings, just doing my job, man." I mean,
Hmm.
they're businesslike, and I think that's the reply I'd get.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of Toby, your friend from the Devil's Den incident, I always wanted to ask you this question. I mean, you had no idea at all whether Toby had been an experiencer before then, but was he just in the wrong place at the wrong time with you that night in Arkansas when they arrived and took you? Was it just you they wanted?
Well, this was Toby's idea. There were other parks within a 45-minute drive of Whiteman Air Force Base. But Toby, for some reason, and you know what, I never found out, never even asked how he found this park and how he became so fixated on us going there. And why, I protested for a day and then shared his fixation on it and was excited to go. So, I don't know. I know this. I was going there to photograph wildlife. He was going to watch the night sky, free of light pollution, on an elevated plane, which we found. And he'd always been an amateur astronomer. Told me since he was a kid. He could identify constellations. He could predict when a satellite was going to come over. And that fascination with the night sky had to come from somewhere. And we never talked about that topic.
Yeah,
And that's a shame.
yeah.